हमारे इस कार्यक्रम में सभी का स्वागत है। संचालनालय पुरातत्व अभिलेखागार एवं संग्रहालय द्वारा आयोजित हमारी व्याख्यानमाला के तृतीय व्याख्यान में आप सभी का स्वागत है, हार्दिक अभिनंदन है। आज के इस कार्यक्रम में प्रमुख वक्ता हैं प्रोफेसर वसंत शिंदे साहब। वसंत शिंदे साहब एक अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ख्याति प्राप्त पुरातत्वविद हैं। आपने पिछले 35 वर्षों में पुरातत्व के क्षेत्र में विशद कार्य किए हैं। आपने एमए करने के पश्चात दक्कन कॉलेज डीम्ड यूनिवर्सिटी से एमए करने के पश्चात उसी संस्थान से पीएचडी की। आपके शोध का विषय था अर्ली सेटलमेंट इन सेंट्रल ताप्ती बेसिन। उसके बाद 1982 से शिंदे साहब इसी यूनिवर्सिटी में पोस्ट ग्रेजुएट टीचर के रूप में आपने अध्यापन कार्य प्रारंभ किया और विगत वर्षों में कई देशों में और कई देशों के विद्वानों के साथ जुड़ करके देश के प्रोटो हिस्टोरी और आर्कियोलॉजी के फील्ड में काफी काम किया है। आपके मार्गदर्शन में 29 विद्यार्थियों ने पीएचडी प्राप्त की है और आपने 17 विदेशी विद्वानों को भी पुरातत्व के क्षेत्र में मार्गदर्शन दिया है। शिंदे साहब विगत 35 वर्षों से दक्षिण एशिया की प्रोटो हिस्ट्री, फील्ड आर्कियोलॉजी के ऊपर काम किए हैं और आपने 16 मेजर प्रोजेक्ट जो थे, रिसर्च प्रोजेक्ट, उनको पूर्ण किया है। आपके साथ में कई देशों के लोगों की सहभागिता रही है और इसमें कई देशों के लोग आपके साथ कार्यों में जुड़े रहे हैं। विशेषकर इनमें पाकिस्तान, बांग्लादेश, श्रीलंका, ईरान, डेनमार्क, फ्रांस, इंग्लैंड, जर्मनी, बेल्जियम, इटली, ओमान, मलेशिया, चीन, जापान, दक्षिण कोरिया, तुर्कमेनिस्तान आदि ये देश हैं जिसमें प्रोफेसर शिंदे साहब ने जो रिसर्च कार्य किया था, इनके ऊपर अपने कई संस्थाओं में व्याख्यान प्रस्तुत किए हैं। शिंदे साहब ने अभी तक देश विदेश में 140 व्याख्यान प्रस्तुत किए हैं और आपने 117 शोध पत्र राष्ट्रीय जर्नल में और 59 शोध पत्र अंतर्राष्ट्रीय जर्नल में प्रकाशित किए हैं। और आज आप उनका जो एक मेजर रिसर्च प्रोजेक्ट था राखीगढ़ी, जो हड़प्पन साइट है, उसके ऊपर अपना व्याख्यान प्रस्तुत करेंगे। मैं उनका स्वागत है प्रोफेसर शिंदे साहब का और निवेदन करूंगा प्रोफेसर शिंदे साहब अपना व्याख्यान प्रस्तुत करें। प्रोफेसर शिंदे साहब।
Thank you, Ramesh ji. Friends, I am going to speak in English. I welcome all of you. First, I would like to thank Shukla ji for inviting me. I also like to thank Ramesh Yadav ji, the entire team of the department, for inviting me for this particular talk. I am extremely happy to share my thoughts about the research that we have done recently. So what I'll do, in fact, first I will brief you about the most important research. I think I consider this as one of the breakthrough research, and how this research has changed the perspective of Indian history. And in that context, what is the new information, what is the implication of this particular research on the protohistoric phase of Madhya Pradesh. We have done a lot of work, in fact, on the protohistoric sites in Madhya Pradesh. Deccan College has pioneer work, in fact, in this respect. So I am going to shed new light on that particular aspect. Ramesh ji, slides का ये नहीं हो रहा है कुछ. So I'm sorry for the little disturbance, but this is part of the technology that we are using. Now, what I'm saying that I'm going to speak about the recent DNA research that we have done at the site of Rakhigadi, a Harappan site in the state of Haryana. Now, let me tell you firstly that the discovery of the Harappan civilization, Harappan culture, was made 100 years ago. Exactly in fact in 1920, the research was initiated, and after 100 years, in fact, now we have made some breakthrough research, and for the first time, of course, this breakthrough research come from India. So we are proud about this. The site of Rakhigadi is the biggest Harappan city. there are 5 cities, and Rakhigarhi is now much bigger than the so-called biggest Harappan city, Mohenjo-daro. It is almost double the size of Mohenjo-daro. And in this map, of course, you can see, the total area of the Harappans. Also, in the small map in the left-hand upper corner, you can see the 5 Harappan cities, the location of the 5 Harappan cities. And also in the right-hand side, in the lower corner, you can see that number of sites have been excavated in the area which is known today as the Ghaggar Basin. And the same, there is a major river called Ghaggar, and the same river enters into Pakistan, near Bahawalpur district, and in Pakistan it is called Hakra. So the Ghaggar Hakra is considered to be the ancient or the Rigvedic Saraswati. So what I'm doing, I'll just show you first now, why we say that now we have now surely identified the course of river Saraswati. Now the research was started in fact long back on the river Saraswati. Now the map which you are seeing here, in fact it was made in 1746, and is a Mughal period map made by the British scholar, and they have shown in fact 2 major rivers in fact here, 2 major river systems. One is the Indus river system, and the other one is the Saraswati river system, and both of which are running parallel. Now since 18th century, lot of scholars are working on the location of river Saraswati. Then they are also trying to find out, because the river Saraswati has gone dry or disappeared at some stage. So they are trying to find out the the reason of the disappearance of river Saraswati and exactly when this particular event has happened. So as a result, in fact, there are a lot of scientific works have been done also. A lot of archaeologists are working on this particular issue. A lot of geologists are working, hydrologists are working, and even ISRO, in fact, Indian Space Research Organization. Now, some of the scientists from this organization, they are also working, and they have, with the help of the satellite photograph, imagery photograph, they have reconstructed the drainage pattern in the Saraswati basin. Now, in this map, you can see the network of the drainage pattern in the Saraswati basin. And from this map, it is quite clear that the river Saraswati or the river basin was well watered, in fact, right from the early times. And this map really clearly gives idea about that. As far as the location is concerned, there is not of reference about the location of the river Saraswati, the origin of the river Saraswati, the geography, the geology, environmental conditions, etc., around the or in the basin of river Saraswati. Now it is clearly mentioned that river Saraswati lies between Satluj and Yamuna, and you can see in fact this is the river Satluj and this is Yamuna, and in between is the river Saraswati. Now there is no doubt now, in fact, those scholars who raised doubt about the identification of river Saraswati, now they should really now actually consider the scientific evidence that is coming up, in fact, in a major way. And Rigvedic text mentions that the river Saraswati originates in the Himalayas, and the the river which is reconstructed now, the course of the river, that clearly indicates that the river is originating from the foothills of the Himalayas, from the Shivaliks. Then it is also mentioned that on one side is Satluj, on other side is Yamuna, and then it is mentioned that it flows through the fertile area of the region. Then on one side there is a desert, on the other side there is a salt plains, and then ultimately it goes and meets the river, meets the sea. So this is the course of that is properly identified. And also in the Rigvedic text there is a mention about the major tributary of river Saraswati called Drushyadoti. And in this map also you can see that the river the course of river Drushyadoti has been clearly identified or established now. And the site of Rakhigarhi is located on the bank of river Drushyadoti. Now today this particular river is called Chautang or the Chautang Basin. So the region between Saraswati and Drushyadoti was one of the most fertile, and we really see high concentration of the Harappan sites there. When we analyze the settlement pattern data, we clearly make out that nearly 2/3 of the Harappan settlements are located in the Saraswati Basin. So that itself indicates how important this river was right from the early stage, how important it was for the Harappans. So, and therefore, that is reflected in fact in the actual archaeological data. The satellite imagery photograph that is done by the scientists. Now they have clearly found out the course of both in fact river Saraswati here and also river Drushyadoti. So how and when the river has gone dry, that is not really clear. A lot of scientists have worked on finding out when this particular event may have happened, but so far there is no success. But now we can use the archaeological data to indicate when this particular event has happened, because we are getting as you are aware perhaps that the Harappan culture has 3 different phases. The first phase is called early Harappan. Now we have very early dates from the Saraswati region now. Perhaps the earliest dates are coming from this particular part, and it is going back to almost 6000 BC, almost 8000 years old. So from 6000 BC to 2600 BC is the formative stage, what we call as the early Harappan stage. And then that early, and in this early Harappan stage, we have worked at number of sites, and we have studied the development of the culture. So the transformation was happening gradually, and that is quite clear at the site of Rakhigarhi. Then we also excavated Farmana. There is another site called Bhirana, which was excavated by the Archaeological Survey of India. So all the sites have properly demonstrated the gradual growth of the Harappan culture. And the middle phase, in fact, around 2600 BC, the culture becomes more prosperous. And then we see the emergence of urbanization happening around that time. And that urbanized phase of the Harappan culture is called the Harappan civilization. And then this particular Harappan civilization lasted for 700 years, from 2600 BC to 2000 or 1900 BC. And then after 1900 BC, the river, the culture starts declining. And we know that we have some data on the climate, and we know that the river has gone dry because of the the climatic condition. It became more arid, in fact, around 2000 BC. And then there is a gradual decline of the Harappan culture. So these are the 3 phases, the early Harappan phase, the mature Harappan, the middle phase, in which we see the urbanization, and then the last phase called the late Harappan. It is the decadent form of the Harappan civilization. So on the bank of river Saraswati and also on the banks of river Drushyadoti, we are getting the settlements of the early Harappan phase and also of the mature Harappan phase. But after 2000 BC, the late Harappan settlements are going away from the river bank. So this is very important indicator. So that means the river was very, very active, very significant during early Harappan phase and mature Harappan phase. And probably it started drying up around 2000 BC, and it is no more significant as it was in the previous phase. And therefore Harappan people are going away from the river bank. So on the basis of archaeological data, we can suggest that the drying up of the river Saraswati or the disappearance of river Saraswati may have happened maybe around 1900 or 2000 BC. Now we don't know exactly what are the reasons. Even the geologists, hydrologists are working on this particular issue, but so far we know there is no success. There are a number of sites on this. In this map also you can see, clearly, it is originating from the Shivaliks at the foothills of the Himalayas. Then it enters into Punjab. It almost crisscrosses the entire Haryana. Then it goes to Rajasthan, part of Rajasthan, and then of course it enters into Pakistan after that. And the moment it goes into Pakistan, it is called Hakra River. And then in Pakistan, in Bahawalpur, it goes straight, and then the river appears in Kutch part of Gujarat, and then it meets the sea. So this was the entire course of river Saraswati, and that course has been properly now reconstructed. So we have clear-cut idea. Then the second issue that I would like to discuss is about the people, because as I say that now for last 100 years, we had no idea, we had no evidence about who were the Harappan people. Different, maybe inferences were made. Some scholars say that maybe they are indigenous people. A lot of us believe, in fact, on the basis of the archaeological data that was found in the Harappan region. But then there was no scientific, backing. In fact, we could not say with surety that, this is the, conclusion. Then some people say that no, the Harappans were not the indigenous people. In fact, the Mesopotamians came to, to this part, and they are the ones, in fact, who established the Harappan culture and who established the Harappan civilization, in fact, in this part. So these were different opinions, and now we know, in order to, settle this particular issue, in order to find out who are the Harappan people, then there were also a number of contemporary cultures. For example, in Madhya Pradesh, there were Chalkutic farmers who were contemporary to the Harappans. In Maharashtra also same case. In Rajasthan, in other parts also, the entire Harappan region was surrounded by these, the Neolithic or Chalkutic farmers. So, and the Harappans and this contemporary population, they had very good interaction. They were, having trade, and people were moving, in fact, in these different regions. So a lot of mixing was happening right from the beginning. So we wanted to find out, the relation between the Harappans and the contemporary population. Also, we wanted to find out whether the modern population, particularly in the Harappan region, whether they are descendants of the Harappans or not. So these are some of the questions that we were asking, and particularly in the Saraswati basin, we were also interested, particularly at the site of Rakhigarhi, we were also interested to find out the composition of the Harappan population. In fact, we were believing that there were different groups, but that needs to be properly or scientifically identified, and that was that led us, in fact, to the DNA research, because we know that ultimately, if you want to really understand about the people, you have to have DNA data from the Harappan skeletal remains. And fortunately, the Harappans used to bury the dead bodies in a separate graveyard. So the data was available, and a lot of scholars, in fact, right from the discovery of the Harappan cemetery at Harappa, they were trying to understand this, but nobody could succeed. Many scholars tried, in fact, before our efforts. They tried to extract DNA from the Harappan skeletal remains, but they could not succeed. Perhaps the methodology was not right. The DNA science had not really progressed the way it has progressed now, and also the conditions here is so adverse for the preservation of DNA in human body. The climate is very dry, also humid. The ground is always wet, so this is not really ideal for the preservation of DNA. So we tried, in fact, when we published this particular paper in September 2019, there was some criticism. Some scholars say that this is a politically oriented research. But this is not true in fact, because this particular research was initiated in 2006. In fact, this is a site, in fact, the site of Farmana, which I excavated between 2006 and 2010. And one of our aims, in fact, at the site of Farmana was to extract DNA from the skeletal remains and try to understand the composition of the Harappan population and some of the questions that we had. So we excavated, the cemetery, which is roughly 1 kilometer away from the habitation site, and there, in fact, we excavated a large number of data. In fact, this was perhaps the largest cemetery that we had located in this part of the Saraswati basin. The cemetery is spread over an area of 3.5 hectares, and we excavated nearly 70 burials. So you can see from this map, you can see the location of these different burials, and large number of these burials were excavated. What we we did not realize that time, what we did in fact, which was not right. This was not the right approach. We should have followed different approach. What we did in fact, we excavated all the burials at one and the same time. And in this picture, you can see that the excavated burials, and we kept these burials open for almost 2 months, because our intention was good. In fact, we wanted people to come and see the actual the data, and they should understand what is the purpose of our research here. So that was our intention. But then we did not take proper precaution while excavating, because we know that the modern DNA of the modern people, through breathing, in fact, it can easily enter into the DNA or into the skeletal remains of Harappans. So that that precaution was not taken that time. Secondly, when we kept these burials open for 2 months, there are a lot of changes in the climate. Sometimes there was rain, there was sometimes strong sunshine. So that affected whatever traces were there. Perhaps they slipped away. And finally, we tried to extract DNA. In fact, scientists came from different parts of the world to extract DNA, but we miserably failed there. And suppose we had succeeded that time, then we could have published this particular research maybe in 2010 or even earlier. So we could have stated the same conclusions as we have stated now. So it is wrong to mention that this is a politically oriented research. So in the Harappan cemeteries, we find 3 kinds of burials. One is called what we call as the primary burial. Now here you can see, in which we see a complete skeletal remains, and probably the dead body was placed immediately after the death in the pit, and usually the dead body was placed in north-south direction with head towards the north and legs towards the south. So this is the kind of evidence. We get large number of these what we call as primary burials. Then we also have found few what we call as secondary burials. There are certain burials, we have proper burial pit. There are number of burial goods. Usually the burial goods were accompanying the dead bodies. Harappans kept, we find lot of pots inside, and the scientific analysis that we did on some of the pots revealed that the pots contain food. And one of the most important food items which we found, the traces of which we found, were the traces of Indian curry. So we always believe that the antiquity of Indian curry goes back to the Harappan times, almost 5,000 years old. So that that particular evidence was found. Besides pots, we also find a lot of beads. Probably jewelry also was placed or buried along with the dead body. And sometimes, rarely, we find the tools also, the stone tools and also the metal tools buried along with the dead bodies. So Harappans had in fact they had belief that there is a second life, there is a life after death, and in the second life perhaps the person needs food, he needs his clothing, his jewelry and his tools, and therefore they were buried. But the number of these pots or number of maybe beads or tools, they vary from burial to burial. In some burials we have 1 or 2 pots, in some burials 60 to 70 pots. So that is very important. In fact, that shows the relative status, maybe the social status of the person or the economic status of the person. So that is also very important data that we found. So in case of secondary burials, perhaps it is quite likely that they kept the dead body open for some time in the open, and after some time they collected the bones and they systematically buried ceremoniously these bones in the pit. So that is called the secondary burial. So in the secondary burial you find only some human bones. And the third category that we get is called the symbolic burial. There are some burials where we find proper burial pit, we also find burial goods, but there is no human bones at all. So it is quite likely that the person's dead body could not have been retrieved. Maybe he was killed by some wild animal somewhere, or he died in some skirmishes somewhere and his body could not be retrieved, but they thought of giving ceremonious burial to the person, and therefore we find these type of burials. Now I am coming to the site of Rakhigarhi, and why ultimately we succeeded in getting DNA from these skeletal remains at the site of Rakhigarhi. Now I want to show this intentionally because those who want to really excavate burials, they need to take now proper precaution. They need to change their methodologies, their approaches, and I'm going to show in fact what was our approach at Rakhigarhi, and that needs to be really followed in Indian subcontinent. Now this picture gives you idea about the site. In fact, this is perhaps the largest site. You can see this is also part of the site. In fact, where you see the village, nearly 10,000 people are living. Perhaps the best part is under the modern occupation. But at the same time, you can see a large area which is still open. This is protected by the Archaeological Survey of India. This is a national monument now. This is also part of the site, which is also a national monument. So even though maybe 3/4 part of the site is under modern occupation, 1/4 of the part is still visible, still quite intact, and that needs to be protected. But we are making efforts in this particular direction. And in this case also the cemetery is located roughly 1 kilometer to the west of the settlement or the city. And here of course in this map we did a lot of satellite imagery of this particular part. We also had taken some close-up photographs from drone, and we were able to locate the area of the cemetery. I believe that there were a number of cemeteries, maybe because Rakhigarhi was spread over an area of 550 hectares. That means large number of people in lakhs were living, and the cemetery that we have found is not that big in fact. So I am sure that there will be few cemeteries which perhaps we will not be able to locate because the area around the site is completely under modern occupation or under cultivation. So a lot of evidence must have been completely destroyed. So we decide, one of our aims of course at the site of Rakhigarhi, one of our important archaeological problem was to understand about the people, and therefore we decided to excavate the burials here. How our approach was different in fact here. Now in this picture you can see the burials are being properly documented with the help of drone, and when we take the vertical photograph, we don't really need to prepare drawing manually. We can convert these vertical photographs into line drawing also. So that technique also we have developed. And then as I said that we now realize because after the excavation of Farman, after our failure, then I started discussing this particular issue with number of scientists, DNA scientists from different parts of the world. And the Korean scientists, in fact, they gave us proper suggestion. They said that you have to make sure that you have to take a proper precaution, and make sure that the modern DNA does not enter into ancient DNA. So here in this picture you are seeing this is not a corona warrior, in fact, but this is how, in fact, we prepared ourselves before the excavation. So we took all precaution. We had the gloves in the feet. Then we also used this surgeon's gown, then disposable gloves, then disposable gown, then mask, goggle, and head cap, to make sure that the modern DNA really does not enter into ancient DNA. And then, of course, we started the excavations. As you know that most of the excavations are done by archaeologists themselves. So this is how we took proper precaution. This is how we excavate the burials. And then second correction that we did in fact at Rakhigarhi was immediately after the excavation. We excavated one burial at a time, not all. We excavated that fully. We documented it properly, both in fact the photographic document, the manual document, the drawings, etc. Everything was done manually immediately, and immediately we packed the samples and sent to Deccan College laboratory. And this is how we did, in fact. Secondly, we did not use the same tools that which were used for excavation. The same tools were not used for the other burial. For every burial we had fully sterilized tools for the excavation. That is how we made sure, in fact, that there is no contamination. And this is how all the burials were excavated. And the nature of the data is not different from the nature of data that we found at the site of Farmana. In fact, in almost in all the Harappan cemeteries, we find same kind of data. So this is one of the best preserved skeletal remains, in fact, at the site of Rakhigarhi. We did find like that, but at the same time we have some multiple burials, in fact. So this is very interesting burial. The burial that we have a burial of a couple here, one man and one woman. And in fact, I have published a paper on this, and I suggested that this is a burial of a couple. Probably the concept of marriage, the concept of husband and wife, that was perhaps introduced maybe during the Harappan times. Now why I say that? Because this particular burial is found in a proper or the common cemetery. If these two have, suppose, illicit relationship, the relationship which is not acceptable to the society, then the burial would not have taken place in the common cemetery. Maybe they would have done somewhere, dumped somewhere. That is not the case. Secondly, all the maybe rituals were followed. In fact, they also kept lot of pots, lot of burial goods along with the dead body. So we believe that perhaps, and then there are no any injury marks. We don't know how they died. We have not been able to really identify that, but both of them died simultaneously. So perhaps maybe one person died, the other person loved that person so much, perhaps because of maybe heart attack or shock, perhaps the other person also must have died. So this is a very important evidence that we found. They were both, in fact, were very. The husband was very handsome, the wife was very beautiful. So we are getting this this evidence. The people from the skeletal remains appears that they are like the modern Haryana or the Punjab people, Punjabi or the Haryana people. Then you can also see one of the multiple burials, in fact. Now in this case you can see how many pots they have kept here. So the status of the person, both in fact the social status and the economic status of the person, must be quite high in the society. So this type of data in fact we found. Then this is, in the next picture, you can see a very interesting, data. Usually, when we excavate the burials, usually we only excavate the pit in which the remains are there. But we did some experiment in fact at the site of Rakhigarhi. We also did systematic clearance and excavation outside the pit also. And surprisingly, we got this particular evidence, which is very important. Now this is the evidence perhaps which is connected with the breaking of pot, which we do even today. We go around the fire and we break the pot in which we sprinkle water through which. So probably that type of ritual was started by the Harappans, and these are the shards in fact of the broken pots that that this particular ritual involved. So this is also very important, that most of the customs, most of the traditions that the Harappans introduced, they have not really disappeared. In fact, they have continued almost without any change till today. We also did a lot of sampling. In fact, the Korean scientist, the genetic scientist, they have retrieved the parasite eggs from the ancient bodies in Korea, and from the parasite eggs of the individual bodies, they have identified the DNA of the person. In every human, living body, in our body also, there is always formation of the parasite eggs. And when the dead body is buried, in fact, when we die and the body is buried, the body disappears, but the parasite eggs remain intact. So they had done that successfully. So we also wanted to find out here, and therefore we did very extensive sampling. But of course, at the end we did not succeed. Of course, that is a different story. But we want to make sure that not a single shred of data is lost. We made sure that certainly. Then at the site also, we did proper packing at the site. We put the samples in the silver foil, and then the samples were transported to Deccan College laboratory. And in the laboratory also, you can see in the lower pictures that our researchers, they took the same precaution as they did in fact during the excavation. And while cleaning, in fact, samples are cleaned properly, and then they are prepared for the extraction of DNA. So this cleaning was done in Deccan College, and the extraction of sample is done in a clean room. We did not have the clean room that is found only in fact usually in the DNA lab. And we had collaboration with CCMB, Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology in Hyderabad, and these are the genetic scientists working there. What we did in fact, that the samples were sent there for extraction of DNA. They did that, and again the samples were brought back to Deccan College laboratory. Now our strategy was like that. We involved initially only the Indian scientists. The data was excavated by Indians, by archaeologists from Deccan College, from other, maybe some from other universities, and also our collaborator was the State Department of Archaeology, Haryana State Department of Archaeology also. So they were also involved in fact in this research. Then the actual extraction of DNA, the sequencing of DNA, and the interpretation of DNA, that was done at CCMB by Indian scientists. We could have published this data immediately, in fact. But then we realized, suppose we publish this data, only the Indian scientists publish this data, which is very, very crucial, very important, very, very significant, and at the same time very sensitive. The scientists from maybe the advanced countries where they have got really better facilities, they could have easily criticized us. They could have doubted on our research methodology. They could have doubted on our extraction method, on our maybe sequencing and overall interpretation. So what we did, in fact, we prepared the libraries of the samples, and we intentionally made 3 sets of that. So one set was published, one set was studied in India by at the CCMB in Hyderabad. Then one set we sent to Harvard University, not Harvard University, but Harvard Medical School, which has got the best ancient DNA laboratory in the world. And Professor David Rick, in fact, who was our collaborator. Now he is the topmost ancient genetic scientist in the world. And in his laboratory, there are scientists working from Max Planck, Germany, from France, from Belgium, even from Korea and Japan also. So almost the entire scientific community, the genetic scientific community of the world was associated, in fact, in the analysis of the data. So what we did we did the analysis, we got the results, and we sent the samples for cross-checking basically, and also for carrying out some scientific analysis which is not available in the Indian subcontinent or in India. So that further analysis was done there, and the cross-checking was done. So it was done in fact in Harvard, and also we had sent samples to Korea also. And after we got the results from Harvard, Koreans did not really succeed at in these particular efforts. Only the Indian scientists and the American or the scientists working in that Harvard lab, they succeeded. And once we had the results from both these in fact laboratories, we realized that both the results are complementary. They are not really contradicting each other. They are rather going smoothly, in fact, in sync with each other. And then only we decided to publish this in the top international journal. 3 journals are top, in fact. One is Shell, second one is Science, and third one is Nature. All these 3 have the highest impact factor, 40. And getting published in this, that means your research is recognized by the scientific community all over the world, because they have got very rigorous review and re-review of the work, in fact, of the research that is submitted. So that is how we made sure that this is published in top journal, and only after it is published, after it is accepted by the scientific community, then only we made the public announcement of the DNA results. So that is the method that we had followed, in fact, in our research. And this is how one should, in fact, because the research, the scientific research that is done, that needs to be really validated, that needs to be accepted by the community, and then only you can use that for conclusion or for drawing your maybe final conclusions. We did lot of our approach was very systematic. Samples were transported to Deccan College laboratory. The first thing we did was anthropological examination. We examined this. We identified the sex of the person, age of the person, various maybe reasons of the death of the person, etc. That we did, in fact, and then we have published that in in PLOS One, another very important journal published from Germany. Then we did CT scanning of the skeletal data, because the other research perhaps for the first time we did, in fact, in India, was the reconstruction of the facial feature, or what we call as the craniofacial facial reconstruction of the Harappan people. How exactly the Harappan people looked like, 3D reconstruction of the Harappan population, and for that you need CT scanning data. We did that. Then we did this paleoparasitology, parasitology, about which I discussed, and then of course we did the DNA analysis of the samples, and also we did the stable isotope analysis. From the stable isotope analysis, we can always reconstruct their food habit. What is the percentage of plant food, animal food in the diet? So that was done in fact, by our team. And then this whole whatever is possible, scientifically possible, that was done in fact at the site of Rakhigarhi. And therefore, because of our this type of efforts, we could finally succeed in getting DNA from 4 skeletal remains. But the signatures were so weak in fact in 3. We did that, the 3 first, and the 4th sample was done at the end. So the results were very simple, very very fragmentary in those 3 skeletal remains. And we realized that perhaps we will not be able to succeed because the DNA is not survived. In spite of all our efforts, we could not find that. And we were about to abort this efforts. In fact, we thought that it is not possible. And then we found this particular skeletal remains. You can see here, this is a skeleton of a lady, a beautiful lady because she has very sharp features. And then perhaps it was from this lady was from a very affluent family because you can see the number of pots denote her status in the society. Probably from a very rich family, and probably she had a very high ranking, hierarchical ranking in the society, and that is reflected in the data. So this was the last sample, last skeletal remains that was subjected to the analysis. And fortunately, in fact, in this particular skeletal remains, we got a very, very strong DNA. We have at present DNA only from 1 skeletal remains. So from that, we certainly cannot talk about the composition of the people. We cannot talk about the relation between Harappans and the contemporary population. But the most important research, most important conclusion or the information that we are getting from this protocol is we are getting the evidence about the ancestry, the Indian ancestry of the Indian people, or South Asian ancestry of the South Asian people, and also the continuity of this ancestry for last 12,000 years. We got that information from this particular skeletal remains. So naturally, because of this, naturally lot of theories which are based merely on speculation, on unscientific basis, like the migration of the Aryans or the invasion of the Aryans, that theory has been seriously challenged. Because suppose if there was a invasion, in fact, as some scholars believe that it happened around maybe 4,000 years ago, around 2000 BC, then, and it is believed that that the local population was finished by these people, by the invading Aryans, and the surviving people were pushed back, pushed down in fact to south. That was the hypothesis. So initially it was believed that the local people are the Dravidians, the entire population, and the incoming people, the aggressors, invaders, they were the Aryans. They were the superior people. That is the general concept was there. Say suppose this thing would have happened, somebody came from outside, killed the local people, then the ancestry could have changed, could have discontinued. That has not really happened. Secondly, if people came from outside, they could have brought with them the cultural elements from there, which is not found again. From the archaeological data also, we have continuity from the beginning of settled life from for almost 9,000 years. There is a continuity without any break. So therefore now we can easily discard the Aryan migration or Aryan invasion theory. But what is revealed in fact is that the people were interacting with West Asia, Mesopotamians, Egyptians, Persian people. Also, we were interacting with people from Central Asia also. Some scholars believe that the Central Asians were the Aryans. We were already interacting with them. And because of the interaction, there was the mixed ancestry also happened at some stage. But at the same time, the main ancestry was never replaced. And we don't get any trace of the cultural elements from outside at all. Like today, for example, when we Indians go and settle in maybe in America or Europe, we usually preserve our cultural traditions there. And suppose in New York City, maybe after 2000 years, if the city is excavated, on the basis of data coming from structures, archaeologists will certainly identify who have maybe Indian, maybe origin or trace, and who are the local people on the basis of the cultural material. So that is, archaeologically now we could have easily established that. And I'll just give the gist of the paper in fact. Now from this diagram you can see that what happens around 12,000 years ago or 10,000 BC. The people were in hunting gathering stage. Somewhere in maybe northwest part of Indian subcontinent, the hunter gatherers broke into two groups. One group came down to South Asia and one group went to Iran. It was also believed by many scholars that the Iranian farmers, the early Iranian farmers, they are the authors of the Indian population. But that is not true. When these people came to South Asia, they were distinctly developing the ancestry, and they had developed the South Asian ancestry at one time, in which we do not get any mixing from Iran nor from Central Asia. So pure ancestry here. Pure in the sense that maybe when it is more than 30% gene of a particular community, that means that community is evolved from that particular community or particular ancestry tree. So that is how we are getting. And then this ancestry, distinct ancestry was developed, and these are the people who began settle life in this part of the country. And these same people, we have number of sites now, archaeological sites where we have strong evidence about the origin of the communities, farming communities, and the gradual growth of the farming communities. In northwest, the same community was transformed into Harappan civilization. They developed cities and towns at one stage. Same people, because we are getting same ancestry there. But then mixing was maybe 5% from maybe steppe region, 5% from maybe 10% from maybe West Asia, like that. That was happening because of the mixing of the population. But more than 30% was the ancestry or gene of the South Asian people. And then that continues in the Harappans. After Harappans also it continues, in spite of the fact that the number of foreigners came to India in large number. Kushans came here, Huns came here, Parthians came here, the Russian, Scythians came here. Number of groups came, but none of them was able to replace the South Asian ancestry. The South Asian ancestry continuously evolved, and remained intact. The mixing was happening. The mixing, sometimes maybe the mixing of the Iranians after 2000 BC becomes more, maybe from 5 to 10%. Mixing of the steppe people becomes from 10 to 15%, like that. But the main ancestor has not changed. So this is the most important, and because of this particular evidence, we can always believe that most of the hypotheses about the people coming from outside and establishing cultures here, establishing urbanization here, that is not true. In fact, it is the local people who have done, and these people, of course, since they were in contact with people in the hinterland area and also in the international area, they were getting some ideas. The ideas were flowing, of course, from one region to another region, but here they developed their own culture, their own ancestry here. That is very important, and that is the gist of our paper. Secondly, we always believe that the first people, so-called Aryans, began to come to South Asia or Indian subcontinent, but that is not true. We are getting the contrary evidence. The evidence that we have indicates that perhaps the Harappans first began to venture out, and then after that only then some reciprocal movement started happening. Now, why we say that? There are two sites, one in Iran, Shari Sokta, excavated by Iranian archaeologists, and the other site is Gonur in Turkmenistan. Both the sites have been excavated. Both the sites are contemporary to the Harappans. At both the sites we have Harappan material here, small amount, of course, indicating that this material has gone through trade, not developed there, of course. So some skeletal remains from here, in fact 3 from Gonur and 8 from Shari Sukta. They were subjected to the genetic studies, the DNA studies. Surprisingly, what we found here, we found some Harappan genes present in the Iranian population of Shari Sukta and some Harappan genes present in the steppe population at Gonur in Turkmenistan. But we did not find their gene in the skeletal remains, Harappan skeletal remains at Rakhiuri. So what does it indicate? That indicates that perhaps the Harappans first began to go out, started interacting with them. They carried, Harappans maybe carried their cultural elements, their language with them, and that is how the interactions began to spread. One of the the earliest scholars, or those scholars who still believe that the Aryans came from outside, they cite one evidence from Turkey. There is a place called Bogazkoy, and at Bogazkoy they found one inscription of 14th century BC, and in that inscription there was a mention of some Vedic gods, Agni, Varun, Indra, etc. So this scholars say that, look, these gods were there, and those people brought the god with them here. That is how the concept that the Vedic people came from outside and they established the Vedic culture here. That is how this particular concept began. But let me tell you now, this evidence is very important. Maybe around 2500 BC, the Harappans began to go out. They also must have gone to that part, Turkey, and the Harappan cultural elements must have traveled with them. The gods, name of the gods could have traveled with them, and they must have survived. So when that particular inscription was written, they already knew that these are the gods which are worshipped in some area of South Asia, and then of course they probably they adopted that tradition maybe in their culture. That is how the spread must have happened. So this is the kind of evidence that which is very, very important. Now I come to the next part, of course, because I cannot take too much time in fact in explaining each and everything. If you have some questions, maybe you can discuss. Then I come to the next important research part, the reconstruction of the facial features, how the Harappans look like. Now for this, of course, we need complete skeleton data. Like this is a boy, skeleton data, skeletal remains of a boy of 18 years old. It's like typical Haryana, boy. Tall, 6 feet tall almost, had sharp features, well built. So we have reconstructed the facial feature of this particular boy because of the nature of the data that is preserved. It's a close-up of that. Some portion of the his skull is maybe broken. That was reconstructed. And then this is a woman, Harappan woman, around between 45 to 48 years old. So you can see that she's wearing a bangle, a shell bangle in her left hand. The skeletal remains are quite intact here also. So this, we studied both in fact. In fact, we have reconstructed 5 individuals, but I'm going to show just one Harappan man, a boy, and Harappan woman only. So we generate a lot of data. In fact, now we generate proper data of the human morphology. We take the maybe measurements of the bone, the dimensions, everything. We also need the inner morphology of the skeletal remains also, and that is possible, of course, through this CT scanning, and therefore we have generated that data also. So this was done in fact in Pune itself, and now you can see how step by step craniofacial reconstruction of the Harappan boy and Harappan woman was done. So as I say that the first stage we repaired or reconstructed the maybe damaged part of the skull. Then in the second stage, of course, the reconstruction of the skull was done properly, and then slowly then we started putting flesh, blood, muscle on the body. So in the fourth and fifth stage, you can see the muscles are put on, the veins, and this blood is put on the body, and finally we also put on skin on the body. And this is how the Harappan boy looked like. This is the initial stage. This is very, very expensive research. In fact, you need a lot of funding for this. In the next stage, you want to actually identify the color of the eyes, the color of the hair. We also want to do the full reconstruction of the body along with costume. That is the most ambitious and most expensive project that we are thinking about. But we'll be doing that shortly. And then we compared this with the present Haryana people. These are a boy from Haryana from that same village, and Tauji, a woman from the same village. And see the similarity between this Tauji and the ancient Tau. Exactly same features. Even the boy, Harappan boy and the modern boy look exactly same. So it is not only genetically there is a continuity from Harappans till the modern times, but even in the case of complexion, in the case of appearance, there is a continuity, and that you can see here, in fact, here. So now we have 3 sets of evidence. One is the archaeological data, quite clearly at the site of Mehergarh, at the site of Rakigadi, Birana, Parmana, Girawat, everywhere. In fact, we have excavated nearly almost a dozen sites. and we have very strong evidence about the local origin and the gradual growth of the culture. Then genetically also it is quite clear that there is a continuity, and in the case of complexion, in the case of appearance also there is a continuity. So there is no denying the fact now. The hypothesis or countering the earlier hypothesis now is being done now scientifically, not without any strong evidence or scientific evidence. In fact, I say that now I started working on this particular issue, research issue, in 2006. Till this day, till 2019 September, I did not speak a word on the Aryans at all, because we did not have sufficient data. We did not have data. Once the scientific data is generated, then we want to make sure that this information reaches almost everywhere, all over the globe, and that is the effort we are doing. Now, what is the implication? What happens in fact? Let me tell you that the origin has taken place somewhere here. So from here, maybe some group went to Iran, and some group came to South India here. And what happens in fact, because after they descend down here, then they start spreading almost all over the Indian subcontinent, all over India. So what we are getting in fact from the genetic studies, we in order to check in fact whether there is a continuity from Harappans till the present, we studied the DNA of 3,500 modern people, which incorporated all the different groups available in South Asia, all different maybe groups of different religion, different caste, different creed. Everybody was included, and then we compared that with Harappans, and everyone in fact had the traces of the Harappan DNA, or rather that was the main Harappan ancestor in them. So the Hindus, Muslims, Sikh, Isai, even though we follow different religious maybe ideas, all of us have common ancestry. That is quite clear now, and that is on such a large area, from Afghanistan to Bengal, and from Andaman Nicobar to Kashmir. All these people, all of us have the same ancestry as the Harappans have. So there is a continuity, and no doubt in fact when if you look at the present occupation in the Harappan region, you can imagine, you can visualize that they are practicing they are in fact technologically they are in the Harappan age. In Rakigadi village, in fact when we move around the village at Rakigadi, we feel that we are moving in the Harappan village. The same kind of maybe pattern of the settlement, same houses, same pots made by the people. Tandoor, exactly, some tandoor was introduced by the Harappan, same kind of tandoor. So the lifestyle has not changed really. So that is reflecting. So what happens, then the hunter-gatherer spread almost all over here. Okay, and some areas were ideal for the development of agriculture, some areas were not ideal. So in some area, the development of agriculture took place differently at different stages. Earliest evidence of of the agriculture comes from this part and also from this part. To some extent, of course, we have some from the Mewar region of Rajasthan. But in other parts, like in central India, particularly in Malwa, in the entire Deccan region, South India, the agricultural communities come into existence much later. But that does not mean that there were not people. People were already there. They were in hunting stage. The Harappan influence, because the Harappans were so advanced, in fact, they were quite advanced in science and technologies. They were, made tremendous progress, in fact, in agriculture, technology also. So the Harappan influence began to percolate down. It is found strongly on the protohistoric cultures of Malwa or Madhya Pradesh, also the entire Deccan region, and also on the South Indian Neolithic farmers also. The influence is seen up to Bengal, in fact, there is a site called Chiran here. So the Harappan influence is found. So on this such a large area, even though different regional cultures came into existence, we notice that the Harappans were the main who supplied maybe the essential skills, crafts, technologies to these people, and that is how the agriculture began to grow. In fact, different cultures. Why the agriculture, the people in this part, particularly in Malwa and Deccan, or even in that case South India also, they did not develop into agriculture, into urban civilization. Why only the Harappans developed? One of the major reasons for the development of urbanization was surplus production of food grains, because you need to support number of other classes in the society. The Harappans were able to do that because this is the most fertile units, in fact, most fertile arable land here. It is alluvium land here, whereas Malwa has black cotton soil, the Deccan, South India has black cotton soil. And the black cotton soil has tremendous, even though it is potential, it has got a lot of limitations. In this part, the surplus amount of food grain can be grown only when you use iron plows, because deep and wide cutting plowing is required in this part. And that happened, in fact, in the maybe around 4th, 5th century BC. And after that only the urbanization, second urbanization began to happen in this part. The early farming communities really never could grow surplus amount of food grain, and therefore they did not grow into urban culture or urban civilization. So that is happening. Now in this picture you can see we have some early evidence from northwest part of Indian subcontinent, from Afghanistan, and we have very strong and convincing evidence from the site of Mehergarh. The beginning there goes back to 7000 BC and continuous development till the beginning of the Harappan culture and growth of the Harappan culture there. Quite very clearly demonstrated, evident in the archaeological data and also in the genetic data now. In Midganga at Lohra Deva we have very early evidence, in fact it goes back to 6000 or 6500 BC. Here of course in Midganga the main crop was rice, whereas in northwest it was wheat and barley. And I did some work in fact in Rajasthan, in fact in Mewat region at Gilund and Balathar and also at Bagbor. And there we have noticed that there is also origin of the agriculture community and the growth of the agriculture community. So that evidence is very strong, archaeological evidence is very strong. We don't find that in MP, in Deccan, in South India. What we are seeing, in fact, the influence coming from the east, from the west, from Rajasthan, and from all directions. We do not have the evidence of the origin of the agriculture community there. What we have is the evidence of a developed agriculture community, and how is that that culture has developed. So the Harappans, in fact, they were moving in fact around. So perhaps they got mixed up with the hunter-gatherers in MP, in Deccan, in South India, and when there is a need of developing agriculture, it is probably the Harappan people who must have helped them in doing that, help them in developing some of the basic crafts and technologies. So that is the kind of evidence that we are getting in fact in this part in Madhya Pradesh. In East India also the picture is not clear in fact. There also we are looking for the possible early origin and growth of the farming community. We are not really clear, but there is some maybe influence coming from outside also, from China through Burma, etc. So that is the kind of evidence we are getting. Now some pioneer work in fact has been done in fact in Madhya Pradesh by Deccan College. Naudatli was one of the important sites, perhaps the largest Chalcolithic site in entire Malwa region or in entire central India. And here of course in mid 50s, 1950s and mid 1950s and late 1950s, Professor Sankale and Patna initiated systematically research in this part. And from his excursions at Naudatuli, it is quite clear that it was a village, and they were developing these type of maybe rectangular, quite maybe small and big, of course, quite extensive structures, either single room or double room structures. And you can see they only have maybe thin or maybe short mud wall, and above the short mud wall probably there was wetland top structure. So this is the kind of evidence we are getting almost all over Deccan, all over Malwa region, and also in South India, uniformly almost. So this is how this is the part of the characteristic feature of the life of the early farmers in this part. And then of course in this, of course you can see here in fact we have underground pit, we call it silo, which is used for storage purpose. Then we have also cooking place, the domestic hearth. So this is the kind of evidence we are getting in central India. So they were not really able to develop maybe the building material like bricks or mud bricks or burnt bricks. Perhaps their economy did not really allow them to do that, and therefore they preferred these type of structures. And even same kind of structures exist even today. That the farmers in the village, in the villages, you can see part of the wetland top wall, the inner portion is made of screen, bamboo or some creeper screen, and plastered from both sides, from outer side and inner side. So that type of wall is called the wetland top wall. Probably this type of maybe roof on these structures. So we can use a lot of ethnographic data in fact for reconstructing the superstructures of the plants in fact that we have found in fact in the Chalcolithic levels. And you see the pottery not drastically different from the Harappan pottery. It is also black on red pottery. In the earlier stage, in fact, we find some typical. There are three main cultures, Chalcolithic cultures identified here. One is the Kaitha culture, which has got same as the Harappan pottery, probably resembles the early Harappan from Soti and that part from the Saraswati region only. So probably early Harappan people also began to move to this part, and that influence is found here. Then we have black and red. The Ahar, the black and red tradition was developed in Mewar region of Rajasthan. Those people also began to move. The cultural elements also are found here. And then of course some local pottery, what we call as a black on red pottery. So we have this type of painted pottery, which is developed by the most prosperous culture called the Malwa culture in this region. See, we need really we need to re-excavate some of the sites. We need to get the dates from some of the sites, because a lot of sites were excavated long back when the technologies were not advanced. So if we really want to understand the growth of the culture here, then we need to really refresh, the data. We should recreate the data here. But on this pottery, you can see the decorations are exactly like the decorations found on the Harappan pottery. Only the shapes are different because the food habit of the people was different here. So you will not find the same Harappan shapes here, but they have borrowed the Harappan maybe decorative patterns here. That you can see on this pottery. You can see a lot of, perhaps the Malwa pottery is considered the most decorative chalcolithic pottery in the entire Indian subcontinent. You have human figures, you have geometric, figures on the painted on the pottery. You have some animal figures painted, some plant, motifs painted. So that is that's the kind of evidence you find. And then Sankale, when he excavated the site of Navratali, he proposed a hypothesis that the central India had contact with Iran in the protohistoric phase, maybe around 1700 1800 BC. And he said on the basis of this pottery, he found some chalices, a bowl on stand, this type of pottery, and these are some the typical lota that is found. But this is important because these type of shapes are found in Iran at a site called Tepe Hisar, a slightly northern part of Iran, and Tepe Sial. These are the two sites where this type of pot is found. And then there is a footed cup here. You can see the footed cup. So this is not a very common shape, in fact, in Indian subcontinent, found in Iran. So Sankale suggested that there is a strong connection between central India, particularly from between Malwa and Iran. But then he did not have sufficient evidence that time. So some people criticized him, they ridiculed him, etc. But now we have a strong evidence, archaeological evidence, in fact, indicating contact between Iran and central India or Malwa region. Some of the beautiful work. Again, you can see this. There's so much Harappan influence on the pottery here. We found maybe some seals, in fact, on the Malwa and Mewar border. This type of clay ceilings were found. And initially we thought that these type of seals are found, in fact, this type of patterns are found in BMAC region, Bactria margiana archaeological complex, that is in Central Asia, or the steppe region, part of the steppe region. And initially it was thought that this data that is found there is around 1800 BC data. But now we are finding this type of evidence, in fact, in Mewar also, which is dated to around 2400 BC. So we have early evidence here, in fact, here. And then in between, how the influence, it is definitely not coming from West Asia or from maybe Central Asia to Indian subcontinent. It is going from Indian subcontinent to Central Asia. Because we have early evidence here. So from Central Asia, maybe it came to the Harappan site. Channudaro, in fact, has this type of patterns are found at Channudaro. And from Channudaro to Periyana Gundai, it may have traveled to BMAC region. And in BMAC you have these type of patterns here. So now earlier hypothesis is changing now because we are getting new evidence, and this corresponds very well, in fact, with the genetic data that we have generated. People from this part first began to move towards this part, and the cultural elements also were moving, in fact, following them. So this is the kind of evidence that we are getting. So we need more, in fact. I just mentioned about, I've given you some few hints. Even the data that we have generated, in fact, from the archaeological site, from the archaeological site of Rakhigarhi, and some sites, in fact, in Central India, they were not really enough, in fact. We need to have maybe more data, in fact, in this respect. and then only now we can. This is just a beginning, but we need to generate data from different parts of the Harappan sites. We have to have data from maybe a number of Chalcolithic sites, Neolithic sites, and then only now we can talk about the composition of the Harappan population, the interaction between Harappans and the contemporary population, and also the continuity impact. So one evidence is not enough. Only archaeological data is not enough because people will not get convinced. Only genetic data will not be enough because people will always criticize. There will be a lot of doubts in fact. For example, one doubt is that people, in South India they look differently. The complexion is different from the people of North India. But the complexion has nothing to do with genetic history at all. All of them have the same genetic, lineage. The complexion differs from place to place depending on the geography of the region, climate of the region, the food habit of the people, etc. So because of that, these different complexions come into existence. So that is, this type of questions will always, come to our mind. So we don't claim that we have resolved all the issues, but we have made a beginning, and from here onward, now we have to pick up. I have given you, what type of methodology we should follow, what should be our approach. I have talked about that also, and only then perhaps we can talk about the generic picture, broader picture. Thank you very much. I again take the opportunity to thank the Commissioner of Archaeology in Madhya Pradesh, Dr. Rao Yadavji, the entire staff, the department, and I'm really extremely happy to share the new research and its implication on the proto-historic phase. I want to talk the implication of these on the world history impact, not only important from the point of view of Indian history only, it has an implication on the world history, and we need to present this particular picture to the world. Thank you very much.
नागर जी, हेलो सर, कुछ लोग प्रश्न पूछना चाहेंगे आपसे। हेलो,
हाँ पूछिए ना, जरूर।
अभी अपने आप साथ में जो लोग जुड़े हुए हैं, कोई प्रश्न पूछना चाहेगा संजय साहब से? सर आवाज आ रही है हमारी? हेलो,
हाँ मुझे तो आ रही है आपकी आवाज।
आ रही है सर, और लोग तो नहीं जुड़ते दिखा रहे। मैं पूछना चाह रहा था सर, अपना पुराणों में जो एक विवरण है महाराज ययाति के पुत्रों में, क्या उस थ्योरी से, आपकी थ्योरी से मैच कर रही है सर? क्योंकि उसमें भी ययाति के पुत्रों का माइग्रेशन ईरान और दूसरी जगह दिखाया गया।
नहीं, अभी उस स्टेज तक हम पहुंचे नहीं अभी।
जी सर।
लेकिन जो अर्ली टेक्स्ट जो हमारा है,
जी,
जिसको हम ऋग्वेदिक टेक्स्ट बोलते हैं या वैदिक टेक्स्ट,
जी सर,
इस टेक्स्ट के बारे में हम कुछ आपको बताना चाहेंगे।
जी,
जो हमारा जो एक्चुअल एविडेंस हमने जो हमारे पास आया है, जेनेटिक और आर्कियोलॉजिकल। अभी देखिए, ऋग्वेदिक कल्चर के बारे में जिक्र होता है बार बार, और कुछ स्कॉलर्स का मानना था कि ये बाहर से लोग आके उन्होंने ऋग्वेदिक कल्चर एस्टैब्लिश किया, इंडिया में एस्टैब्लिश किया। लेकिन आप जो एरिया ऋग्वेदिक सरस्वती का जो एरिया, ऋग्वेदिक कल्चर में सरस्वती का बार बार जिक्र आता है। अगर आप वो एरिया को देखेंगे तो वो सिर्फ हड़प्पन एरिया है, वहाँ सिर्फ हड़प्पन सेटलमेंट्स हमको मिलते हैं, हड़प्पन कल्चर का एविडेंस मिलता है। वहाँ कुछ उस एरिया में उनके साथ वैदिक कल्चर के साथ फायर वर्शिप के भाई जिक्र आता है। सिर्फ हड़प्पन सेटलमेंट्स में भी, सेटलमेंट्स से नहीं सिर्फ फायर वर्शिप का एविडेंस आता है। कुछ अलग अलग काइंड्स ऑफ सेटलमेंट्स का डिस्क्रिप्शन आता है, वो सब डिस्क्रिप्शन हमारा हमको हड़प्पन में मिलता है। तो हम इस स्टेज पे हमको एक हिंट मिल रहा है कि ऋग्वेदिक कल्चर और हड़प्पन एक ही थे। लेकिन इस प्रकार का अभी हिस्टोरिकल जो रिकॉर्ड्स है उसमें भी हमको ये कंपैरिजन करना पड़ेगा। तो ये सब देखने की जरूरत है, लेकिन ये
ठीक है सर।
करने की जरूरत है क्योंकि हमारे पास काफी रिच टेक्सचुअल डेटा है, उसका और
जी
आर्कियोलॉजिकल डेटा का सिंथेसाइज करना बहुत जरूरी है।
जी जी ठीक है सर। कुछ लोग और शायद पूछना चाहे, कोई आप में से
कोई बाद में भी
एक
पूछना चाहे तो मेरा ईमेल तो है, आप मुझे लिख भी सकते हैं, कोई किसी को पूछना है
जी
तो।
जी
Hello,
जी
sir. Sir, can you listen
हाँ,
me, sir?
यस सर,
Sir, this is Shubham from Institute of Archaeology.
यस सर।
Sir, actually, I want to ask that since we are talking about Rakhi Gadi and iron migration and all those things, sir, do you think that Sir Sinoli has any connection with Harappa? Sir, since we are getting coffin burials there, but we are not getting coffin burials in mature Harappan levels of Rakhi Gadi or any else site. Sir, do you think, sir? Can you please add on to it, sir?
See, I think the Sonauli, frankly, that data needs to be properly understood, because we have not really understood the data from the site of Sonauli yet. Because firstly, the chronology of the site has to be clear, and then only we can make statements. But it is really premature at this stage to relate the maybe data with any maybe epics. We need to have really more data in fact. Then only perhaps we can do this type of maybe comparative study. But certainly at this stage, because only the excavator maybe will be able to give us some insight on this. But at this stage it is not really clear in fact what is the date of Sonauli, and we need to really understand from the point of view its relation with the settlement also. So settlement we have not been able to really ascertain at the site of Sonauli yet. So unless there is this type of maybe complex data available, perhaps it is very difficult to make any statement about that.
Okay. Thanks.
ठीक है सर। ठीक, प्लीज एक माइक अपना आवाज कम करिए, आवाज कम करिए। ठीक है सर, धन्यवाद। और लोग नहीं जुड़ना चाह रहे। प्रोफेसर संजय साहब का मैं आभार व्यक्त करता हूं, और हमारे कार्यक्रम में जितने भी हमारे पार्टिसिपेंट जुड़े हुए हैं, मैं सभी का आभार व्यक्त करता हूं विभाग की ओर से। धन्यवाद। नमस्कार।
नमस्कार, धन्यवाद।
नागर जी, धन्यवाद।